What can you buy for a coffee a day? What do you think is possible if you would invest your coffee expenditure of a day into something else? This is what actually passive house would cost you. The additional investment for you would be getting a house that is comfortable, healthy, and as well has a far higher resale value. That's what our new article is about, and we want to talk about in our coffee talk. Here, coffee a day and coffee talk of your passive house mentors. So, Julia, tell me about it. What is this article about?
Yeah, perfect. Coffee talk really makes sense today. So we're talking about the coffee a day, the real cost of passive house in Australia. So we have this situation here where we're looking at that cost of a coffee a day and making that realization that for that cost of coffee a day, we could finance the additional cost of a passive house. So maybe we have to go a little bit deeper into that and explain to you how that really works, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what we're doing here. At the end, we're explaining you how to calculate passive house costs. Sounds really boring, but we will make it interesting. So here we start with a little story of Mark, a guy in Perth that is sitting there and drinking his coffee with his client, and he thinks about, bloody hell, how did the coffee prices go up recently?
Mhm.
If you remember the prices before the pandemic, less than $4 if you're lucky. Yeah, and now you're spending $6 for a flat white sometimes. If you
Yeah.
want something a bit more fancy, then you're already in the $6, $7, $8 range, depending on your barista coffee that you're choosing and where you're going and how fancy it is. So that's the experience of Mark, and he's thinking, how expensive is that? And what is happening then?
Yeah, so looking at expensive coffee, thinking about his client that just said to the passive house quote, "Oh, it's too expensive." Yeah, so that's what we often hear people saying about passive house is too expensive. But the irony wasn't lost on him because she said that while she was holding her $6 or maybe $7 coffee in her hand. And Mark did a little bit of calculations and scribbling, maybe even on the napkin that was in front of him. And he said that if the additional cost of this particular passive house was, let's say, $48,000 in our example, if we're financing that over 30 years at 5% interest rate, then we need to pay $3,150 of extra repayments for that per year. And if we are also subtracting the energy savings that we have in a passive house, then really we're looking at our coffee and we're saying $4.70 a day, that's what we need to pay extra for a passive house. Now, that was a lot of numbers. I think you need to
Yeah.
break that down a little bit more.
Yeah, let me break that down a little bit more. So what he actually
Exactly.
did, he it took a napkin, like this typical back of a napkin calculations, and he checked what is the additional cost for passive house. So for this passive house, it was $48,000. So not even $50,000 for actually achieving passive house. And then he applied the knowledge that he got in his passive house designer course, where he actually learned how to calculate the interest rates of mortgages and stuff like this. And he came to an annual repayment of $3,150 if you have a loan period of 30 years and a 5% interest. So just a bit more than $3,000. But on the other hand, he knows that the average Australian household has an expenditure of $3,000 per year to operate the house. So in other words, your electrical bill, your water bill, your gas bill, if you're still having gas, if you're putting that all together, then the average household has about $3,000. And we know that passive house cuts that in half. So out of 3,000, we're making 1,500. Yeah, that is left over. If you divide that by the 360 days or 65 days, then you come to this $4.70. Yeah, that's what he was calculating. And that is far less than this $6 coffee prices nowadays. So if you would, instead of going to your favorite barista, have your little coffee machine at home and make a coffee yourself that may cost you $1, then you're saving your $5, and that's more than actually passive house will cost you on a day. So let's explain that a little bit more. So what is actually happening here?
Yes. So it means that all the passive house advantages all that excellent could cost you less than your daily coffee run. Yeah, so think about it. If you're saving that, you can live in a home that's healthy, comfortable, and sustainable. And let's maybe talk about what you actually get for this extra $48,000, because now that's a number that we're throwing into the room. But what kind of building are we talking about here?
We're talking here about our hub home. This is what you get in our courses, the hub home that we are looking at and calculating and putting everything together. That's a small little, terraced home normally, but it doesn't need to be a terraced home. We look at it as a freestanding home of 125 square meter. In there, we have the ground floor that is a whole living, dining, kitchen area where you can actually live. This is more than 50 square meters for living, dining, kitchen. And then upstairs, we're having 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. And downstairs in the entrance, we're having another little bathroom in there. So you have 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, and a living, dining, kitchen on a 125 square meter house. If you now say, oh, this is a bit small for me, then you can actually double up. Say you go for a 250 square meter house, what is more typical in Australia. Then you have 6 bedrooms. Yeah, that's a lot. You have to make a lot of babies for that. Then you have your 4 bathrooms and 100 square meter for your living, dining, kitchen area. So this is massive, and this would cost you then 2 coffees a day. So you
Exactly.
and your partner would then have to go for coffee at home, and that 125 square meter house costs an additional of $48,000. So in other words, less than $50,000 is the investment for a small home to make it a passive house.
How did you get to this number? Is that a real example, Daniel?
It's a real example that I actually put together in 2022. So year 22, I actually took our home and I got quotes in. I asked people what they're charging, what are the rates and all that, and put that together, put builder's margin on top of it. And out of this, I was able to calculate that $48,000. So 50% you can say is the building envelope. About 40% is your design part, and then the additional 10% or so is your building services, so your hot water and domestic hot water and heat recovery. And then obviously you have to subtract your expensive air conditioning system that we can take out. Fun fact is, the windows, how much you think the windows were? How much you think we would pay for a whole house of 125 square meter, 23 square meter of glazing, windows, not glazing, but window area? How much would that cost if it's a passive house? This is an actual quote from Kinsale Industries in Sydney for less than $10,000. That's all what the window, that's not the additional cost, that's the actual window quote. Yeah, guys, so don't get me wrong. This is not the additional cost for passive house. This is the actual window quote. So your square meter rate for a window was less than $450. This is unbelievable, guys. Passive house
There's no
doesn't need to be
difference.
expensive. Hmm?
There's no difference to conventional home cost, right?
There is
For the
actually
windows.
conventional ones that cost more than 450 a square
Yeah.
meter. Yeah, and you only get single glazing and not Swiss spacers for high performing edging, and it makes no sense that we're spending so much on single glazing if you can get passive house quality windows for the same price. Cool.
Wow. That's so good. I have the feeling there's a little bit confusion, especially about the windows, right? Because a lot of people think that passive house, because it's so particular and requires certain elements, that the windows have to be very, very special and very, very expensive.
Mm-mm-mm. Here we actually see a typical passive house trap that I see that a lot of designers are doing. They're hiding design decisions in passive house costs. Yeah, they're putting on a different coat. It's like a wolf in a sheep's coat. Yeah, by saying, "Oh, passive house is expensive," but it is this bad design decision. So, what we see is people, especially designers, look then into what is available on the market, what are passive house windows, and see now all these beautiful shiny objects. Yeah, and now you can get your moon cut windows, moon cut timber out from Scandinavia with hidden hinges, triple glazing, 5 seals, and every bells and whistles. And now they say that's what passive house needs. That's not true. You only need double glazing in most regions in Australia. Instead of an aluminium spacer, you use a high performance spacer of your glazing. Yeah, so that's a little bit the difference. But UPVC is fine. You can use your UPVC and drive through Europe. You will see that mainly the UPVC over there is simple white. Yeah, drive around, keep your eyes open, and you will see your windows are normally white because they are UPVC. If they're not UPVC or not white, go closer. Most of the times it's fake wood, or it's a color on UPVC. So the reality is most windows are now UPVC because it is the most affordable way of achieving high performance. And before you're not getting this high performance, you rather use UPVC. Obviously, if you want to use timber aluminum clad, go for it. It looks great as well. Has a bit more maintenance requirement, but it would be slightly more sustainable. Not much, but slightly more sustainable. So this is where we have this mistake. Similar would then happen with different finishes and natural tones here, and they then sell it all under passive house, and that is not required. Passive house is at the end putting a bit of plastic on your walls for your airtightness, or membranes, better said. Then you put a bit more thermal insulation into your walls normally, and you put a bit better windows in. It's all only a little bit more than we normally do, but in a smart way. And by this, we're achieving these amazing results that passive house is giving us.
That sounds pretty simple. It sounds like you have a lot of options there as well, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So now let's come back to the coffee a day, because we're still saying it's the cost of a coffee a day, but that's not forever, or is it? Do I have to pay the extra cost of a cup of coffee for as long as I live? Or how does that financial burden behave over the years?
Okay, so if we are having to invest into a passive house, here that's the $48,000 in this 125 square meter home, then that $48,000 is financed via a loan. We're normally not paying everything out of our pocket. And if we have an additional investment, then this additional investment all needs to be financed via a loan. And that is now our passive house loan that we call here with a 5% interest rate. I know a lot of interest rates are higher in the moment than 5%, thanks to inflation and a few things that are happening on the political spectrum as well. But theoretically, we can use the 5%. It's relatively safe. And as well, theoretically, we can use green loans to actually push it lower, but that's not overcomplicated. So we have an investment of $48,000. We say we pay that off over 30 years. And for this, we are then having a monthly repayment of $3,150. So $3,150 is obviously far more, annual repayment of $3,150. That's obviously far more than a coffee would cost, but we need to think about the financial burden. So you only can spend the money that you have. Money that you don't have, you can't spend. If you're running a business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You may have a really, really profitable business, but your cash flow looks pretty bad. And you can't pay your bills, even if you're theoretically profitable. That's what we're talking about. So we speak about the financial burden, the additional money that we need to leave on the table to achieve passive house. And that's that coffee a day. So think about it. We spend now this $3,150 additional minus our operational expenses that we are saving. We're saving this $1,500 a year on running a passive house. Conventional 3,000, passive house 1,500. So we're saving this $1,500. If you're now subtracting them from each other, we come down to this $1,650, so a bit more than $1,500. If you now divide that by the days of the year, you come down to this more or less $4.50. And this $4.50 is far less than your coffee. Yeah, so this is where we come to a coffee a day. At the end, super simple math. If you want to know more how that is calculated, download the article below, because or like go to our website to the article related to our coffee talk. There you get the details on how that actually works and how that is fully calculated. And at the end, Passive House doesn't need to be expensive. Passive House costs you less than a coffee a day, and that is the message. What else do we have here?
I think it's important to say, Daniel, that that's your additional financial burden in the first year.
Oh,
So it
yes.
actually gets better. It gets better. So this is only, if you're saying, oh, now I can't have a coffee for the rest that I'm living in this passive house, can't go out to my favorite coffee shop anymore. That's not what it is. So it gets better every single year. And we want to go into that a little bit as well.
Okay, yeah. So the first year, that's the coffee a day. After 10 years, it's already just a 7-Eleven coffee. Yeah, because what is happening is energy gets more expensive. Yeah, in the moment, it's $3,000, $4,000 that we're spending a year in average in Australia for operating our homes. But this is getting more and more. Yeah, passive house is going more as well, but the increase of passive house is not as fast because we need only 50%. So it's only 50% of that increase. So we're increasing again that gap between a passive house expenditure and a conventional expenditure. And this creates an additional saving. And with this, what was a coffee a day as a financial disadvantage as a passive house owner becomes a 7-Eleven in 10 years. After 20 years, the financial burden is break even. And then after 30 years, when the loan is fully paid off, you're actually having $15 more in your pocket every single day. In other words, a free lunch every single day because of you went for passive house. And this is like the financial burden we are talking about. What's from an economical perspective or from an investment perspective? This is another prospect that we need to look at, because a passive house and a conventional house, they're two different products. And we know that people are willing to spend more for energy efficient, sustainable homes. And in that year, in the year 2022, it was in average $125,000 more for a building that has been purchased in that year to be spent on energy efficient homes if you would put them next to each other. This is coming from the report of domain.com.au. There they do every single year research regarding domain sustainability in property reports. And this is now the numbers that we have. So in other words, your financial burden is a coffee a day or less than a coffee a day, but you're already out of your $50,000, you make $100,000 upfront. So you put a $50,000 in as an investment, and you're getting $100 out from an economical perspective. So it makes total sense from that perspective as well. And it only gets better because your financial burden, so the cash you're having in your hand, that gap is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're having a better product at the end from an economic perspective. But there's far more than obviously with passive house.
Yeah. For more, all the benefits that we already know from passive house.
Yes.
Sounds amazing. And it's I think it's a problem that perception of passive house, that it's so expensive, and that some professionals even add some extra costs like 20-25% just because it is a passive house, and because they can do that, and the clients might be willing to pay that because they're getting a passive house. Or some people might not have the experience and are saying, passive house, that sounds a little bit tricky. Maybe I'll just add on a little bit of extra cost to cover my back.
Yeah, it's a typical market behavior. Yeah, like it's a question of demand and supply. Simple as that. Yeah, like if everybody would be able to provide a passive house, then you wouldn't be able to charge 25% more. It wouldn't be possible, because now you would be competing. But as we have so few professionals still, like for whole Australia, I think we have 2,000 professionals, 1,000 designers, 1,000 tradies, more or less. So that means there's not many professionals. So there is no competition for getting a passive house building. And that's the reason they can charge whatever they want to. Yeah, to some extent. A lot of them are as well really conscious and they want to do the right thing. So I'm not saying that they are all like money grabbers, but we see that they may be not too worried about adding a cost to the bill because they can charge it. And as well, often they're not as experienced. So what we know from Europe is that after 7 years of being in the business, seriously being in that business and saying, hey, I do passive house, I want to do quality, we normally know that after 7 years, the builders and designers are normally able to provide it to the same cost, than conventional builds, and often even lower. I know multiple situations where they're able to provide passive house 10% cheaper and 10% cheaper than conventional homes. And this is as well the reason why a lot of the EU projects, these massive EU projects, are actually done as passive houses because they're more economical, not just over the lifetime of the building, but even in construction cost, they're becoming more cost effective than conventional. This sounds now too good to be true. What is happening? Why is it becoming more cost effective? It has something to do with the designing and the execution. In a passive house project, design and construction need to work hand in hand. If they're not working hand in hand, then it's not working and you're having a failure. And as this is more important in a passive house than in another one, and the process of passive house certification is asking you to connect this design and construction part, is the reason why we are able over time to just get process optimizations that then result in cost optimizations. That's simple as it is. Like, it's just optimizing, and that's the reason why it takes a few years for actually getting there. So there's still no competition. If you're getting now into the game, you're able to be on the front run, and over time you're able to provide a better service to the same price or even be cheaper. It makes total sense, and it's the first step.
It does make total sense. So for all the people, builders, architects, passive house friends that are watching us here now, what does it mean for them if they are starting, the passive house journey now, or because it sounds like it's achievable, but why should they start now and not delay?
The reason is the knowledge that is coming through these courses is the foundation of the homes of the future. Like, if you're not achieving better homes to the same price, we're not making processes look like okay, now I'm going really into what the building industry is doing. Like, the building industry hasn't had any innovation for centuries. The last big evolution that we had is actually reinforced concrete. And that's 300 years ago. And reinforced concrete was used by the Romans over 2,000 years ago. And then if you look at brick buildings, bricks have been used like 5,000 years ago. So we're still using technologies that are totally outdated in a way. Not that concrete is bad, like it is bad from an environmental inspect, from what energy is in there, but it's not necessarily a bad building material from a building material's sake. We need to move forward with our building industry. Our cities are changing. Our cities are not any longer a 2D structure, they are 3D, they're vertical cities. So we need to think of our apartment blocks as vertical cities. We need to provide healthier buildings because we spend over 90% in there. And we need to think of this loneliness pandemic and this falling apart of the community in these buildings. And passive house is only the first step. If you're not getting the physics right, the biology of the humans right, from just a physical biological understanding, that's what passive house is doing, then we are not moving forward with our society. And that's the reason why that is so important. So that course is great and it gives you the insights, but there's so much more to it, and it's difficult to put it into words. And it's my passion, and that's the reason I'm actually looking at beyond passive house. Passive house is only the first step. The smart plus building process and the smart plus building assessment is where we really want to get to, but that's a different story. That's not here for passive house.
I love your passion. I love your such an expansive knowledge in you, and that we're getting a little bit of a glimpse into that, because we started talking about a coffee a day and we ended up with vertical cities, which I love that we made this connection. But as the end result, we can say to the people here confidently, passive house doesn't have to be expensive. Yeah, it is affordable. Tell them to your client. For the first year, it's just the extra expenditure of a coffee a day. So if you don't go to your favorite coffee shop for a while, you can make passive house work, and you can be healthy, comfortable, and in a sustainable home. That's in the end a lot worth a lot more, and a resale value as well.
And it's not even passive house, like it's the
Yes,
foundation of high performing buildings. That's what like, I don't care about if you call it passive house at the end, and if you're fulfilling the standard, as long as you're applying the PHPP, the right approach, the physics, the science. If you at the end fail your blow test by zero point 0.1 air exchanges, who cares at the end? Like, it's not so important, but the passive house standard really gives you a guidance to actually um, build better buildings that are economical and are designed for humans. Yeah, for the human body, for the human needs. So that's pretty much what it is. Okay.
wonderful. Love
Yeah.
your insights. Next week, we'll talk about a little bit more sciencey, a little bit more nerdy. We're going into why cold spots are mold spots. I think that's really interesting as well. So we're going a little bit more into the physics. This has all, like, so far it's been the basics and why we should go to passive house, but we're going a little bit more into detail. Really looking forward to that one. Looking forward to all your knowledge on this field. So yeah, see you then next week.
See you next week, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.